Careless People. This video is based on key insights from the book Careless People by Sarah Wynn-Williams. Section 1. This section covers chapters 1 to 3 in the book. Sarah Wynn-Williams, fresh from her idealistic days at the UN, stepped into Facebook with a mission. She thought she could help guide this powerful new platform for good. But she quickly found a culture driven by something else entirely: the pursuit of growth and profit at almost any cost, a kind of narcissistic greed. One of the first signs of this disconnect was her assignment to manage a visit from the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Sarah believed this was a chance to build a relationship between Facebook and a foreign government. She had hoped to engage in a discussion about how social media could be used to improve people's lives. But what mattered to Facebook's leaders was something different. The CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, showed no interest in meeting the Prime Minister or in engaging in any discussion about policy or politics. Instead, Zuckerberg seemed focused on the engineering side of the company and annoyed by anything that distracted from it. This showed that Facebook didn't care much about helping other people if it didn't help them make money. Even Sheryl Sandberg, the company's second-in-command, seemed more interested in the image of a powerful executive than in discussing real issues with the Prime Minister. She charmed everyone, but she spent most of her time advising the Prime Minister on how to use his Facebook page, and not on important issues like online safety and privacy. The whole meeting felt more like a celebrity meet and greet than a serious discussion about how Facebook could work with governments. Sarah noticed that at Facebook, engineers were the most important people. People like her, who worked on the Sheryl's side and dealt with policy and government issues, were not seen as important. This showed how little the company cared about the real-world impact of its platform. It was focused on making money, not on the well-being of its users or the needs of society. It was like the engineers could do whatever they wanted without considering the consequences. The visit from the Prime Minister showed Sarah that Facebook was not the idealistic place she had hoped it would be. It was a company driven by a relentless pursuit of growth and profit, with little regard for the ethical implications of its actions. The people running Facebook only seemed interested in whether other countries could help Facebook make money. It was an eye-opening experience for Sarah, and she realized she had a long way to go if she wanted to change Facebook from the inside. Section 2. This section covers chapters 4 to 7 in the book. Sarah Wynn-Williams stepped into a world that was super different from anything she knew before. It wasn't just about new tech stuff, but also the crazy amounts of money floating around. People at Facebook were rich, like really rich. She found out that even assistants could be richer than their bosses, just because they joined the company earlier and got stock options. It was like they bought houses in a poor area that suddenly became fancy. Sarah saw women wearing huge diamond rings and expensive handbags, and she felt like she couldn't even keep up with the fancy stuff. It felt like a silent competition of who had the most expensive things. Then there were the weird things people said, like calling themselves price insensitive because they had so much money they didn't care about costs. Some people even said their Facebook salaries didn't matter because they made so much money from Google before. Sarah, on the other hand, had to worry about money because her salary was just enough to pay rent in 2 cities. Besides money, Facebook also ran on a lot of energy. People like Marn, Elliot, and Sheryl worked super hard, all the time, and they expected everyone else to do the same. They thought working hard was the most important thing. Marn worked all day and night, barely ate, and tracked every calorie. Sarah felt like she had to keep up, working crazy hours and barely sleeping, just to answer Marn's emails. Sarah wondered what they were giving up for their jobs, like family and friends. But Marn said her job was her life, and she didn't need anything else. Sheryl even said that Facebook gave people too much work on purpose, so they wouldn't have time for anything else. That way, they would just keep working harder and harder. To keep people working, Facebook had tons of perks, like free food, snacks, and laundry service. It was like a never-ending birthday party for kids. But it was all meant to keep people focused on work and make them more productive. Facebook's little red book, like Chairman Mao's, told employees they were changing the world, not just working for a company. The book said Facebook was about social justice and that they were all a family. Most people seemed to believe it. Sarah also bought into it. She loved her job and felt lucky to be part of something important. Within weeks, Sarah and her team were making rules for how social media should work. They created community guidelines, transparency reports, and rules for dealing with the police. She really thought she was helping Facebook make the world better. Each day brought new problems to solve. A contractor made promises to the Vietnamese government that Facebook couldn't keep. A consultant lied about how many underage users Facebook removed. The Mexican president got mad about poop emojis on his page. Sarah and Marn worked hard to fix these problems and make responsible decisions. By 2012, some of the guys in the office started wondering what Facebook really stood for. They were shocked when Marn said it was just about connecting people and making money. They wanted principles and a vision, but Marn just wanted to get through her emails. To solve this, they planned a summit in California to decide what Facebook stood for. Sarah was excited, hoping they could use Facebook to make the world better. But the summit wasn't what she expected. Instead of solving problems, they played icebreaker games and took personality quizzes. Finally, they talked about finding an issue Facebook could lead on. Joel Kaplan suggested supporting the military. Sarah was the only non-American on the team and felt lonely. She thought it was a bad idea for Facebook to immediately support the military, since some countries didn't like the US military. But Joel said military issues were always winners. Without an agreement, the military idea was dropped. Then Marn said Facebook's first big project would be about organ donation. Body parts weren't the issue Sarah would have chosen, but there wasn't any discussion. It mattered what Cheryl thought. She had offered to help a friend find organ donors. Sarah was told to work with engineers to set it up. But organ donation wasn't a universal thing. Some religions didn't like it, and some countries had problems with organ theft. In a meeting with Cheryl, it became clear they had different ideas. Cheryl wanted Facebook to collect data and play a bigger role in the organ market. Sarah explained the legal and cultural issues, but Cheryl seemed annoyed. She asked if she couldn't just fly to Mexico and buy a kidney for her daughter. Sarah realized Cheryl was serious and used to getting what she wanted. Marn jumped in to save Sarah, explaining that Facebook couldn't handle the rules and laws in every country. Cheryl reluctantly agreed to scale back the project. But Cheryl wasn't giving up. She wanted to make the project a success, so she told the engineers to add "registered as an organ donor" to people's Facebook profiles. She also told Sarah to include a pop-up ad about the organ donation tool. The engineers didn't like this idea because they didn't think Facebook should push people to do anything. Sarah agreed. But Cheryl really wanted the pop-up, even though Mark didn't. She told Sarah to send an email to the whole team, including Mark, explaining Cheryl's point of view as if it was Sarah's own. While Cheryl was on a plane, Sarah sent the email. Mark responded with angry attacks, saying Facebook should be a neutral platform. Cheryl didn't respond. Sarah got a direct email from Mark Zuckerberg. It was 4 words long: "I am overruling you." As April 2012 approached, Elliot told Sarah to take Javier Olivan to a summit in Colombia and make sure he had a good time. Javier was an important person at Facebook, and the leaders were worried he might leave after the company went public. Elliot didn't care about Sarah's policy ideas. He just wanted her to make Javier happy, so he would stay at Facebook. Javier was in charge of Facebook's global growth. His team came up with ideas like importing contacts and the People You May Know tool. They were aggressive and quick to take opportunities, even if it meant bending the rules. Before working at Facebook, Sarah didn't realize that the growth team was so important. Their values were the company's values: growth and more. Sarah and Javier went to a dinner with heads of state, but Facebook didn't have any seats. They spent the evening standing near the food, watching the politicians eat. The next day, while biking, Javier talked about his future. He was thinking about leaving Facebook to start his own company. Sarah booked Javier to give a speech at the summit, right before President Obama spoke. But the audience left to see Obama, leaving Javier to speak to an empty room. After the speech, Javier wasn't upset. He invited Sarah to hang out with his friends. She met them at a restaurant owned by Juan Del Mar, a bullfighter and adult actor. The men made jokes that Sarah didn't understand, and they switched to Spanish whenever they wanted to talk about her. Later, they went to a salsa club where Sarah saw Hillary Clinton dancing. Javier was happy to have proved her wrong. As they danced, Sarah asked Javier if he was going to quit. He said he didn't know. It's been over 10 years since that night. Javier is still at Facebook, running the place with Mark. Section 3. This section covers chapters 8 to 11 in the book. Sarah Wynn-Williams saw how money and fame could mess with people's heads in Silicon Valley. When Facebook hit 1 billion users, the higher-ups didn't celebrate like the regular workers did. Instead, they panicked because they thought they were running out of new people to join. The company's stock was doing badly, and they thought the only way to fix it was to get lots more users, especially from other countries. Sarah's job, which used to be not so important, suddenly became super important. She had to travel to different countries and talk to government people to get them to let Facebook in. Sarah noticed that some of her bosses didn't really care about doing what was right. They just wanted to grow the company, no matter what. For example, they wanted to get Facebook into Myanmar, even though the government there was blocking it. They didn't really care about what the government was doing or why. They just wanted the millions of new users. Sarah had to go to Myanmar and try to convince the government to let Facebook in, even though it was a dangerous place. She met with important people, but it was hard because they didn't trust Facebook. Sheryl Sandberg, Facebook's COO, became a celebrity after her book Lean In came out. Sarah saw that Sheryl sometimes used her position at Facebook to help herself, like when she asked Sarah to help her get visas for her nannies. When Lean In came out, Sarah and the other women at the DC office had to do a lot of work to help Sheryl promote the book. Some people thought it was unfair because they were already busy with their regular jobs. Sheryl's book was about how women could succeed at work and at home if they worked hard enough. But Sarah noticed that Sheryl didn't always follow her own advice. Sarah went to Japan with Sheryl to help her promote Lean In. Sheryl wanted to meet with the Prime Minister of Japan, even though Facebook wasn't very popular there. She even wanted to bring her parents to the meeting, which was unusual. Sarah had to deal with a lot of drama, like when Sheryl got angry at her makeup artist. Sarah realized that Sheryl had a temper and could be mean to people. She also saw that Sheryl cared a lot about her image and wanted people to think she was perfect. Sarah thought that fame had changed Sheryl and made her less real. Sarah noticed that Sheryl could be really mean to the people who worked for her. She would yell at them and embarrass them in front of other people. Sarah saw that Sheryl liked to have power over people and keep them on edge. Sarah felt bad for the people who Sheryl treated badly, but she didn't say anything because she was afraid of Sheryl. Sarah realized that the things Facebook said about being open and honest weren't always true. People were afraid to speak up because they didn't want to get in trouble. Sarah also realized that Facebook didn't really care about its users. The company just wanted to make money and grow, even if it meant hurting people. Sarah saw that the leaders at Facebook didn't let their own kids use social media because they knew it was bad for them. But they still wanted to get kids addicted to Facebook so they could make more money. Sarah felt like she was getting used to doing bad things and that she was losing her sense of right and wrong. Sarah had a baby and found it hard to balance her job and her family. Her bosses expected her to work all the time, even when she was pregnant or had just given birth. They didn't care about her family or her health. They just wanted her to do her job. Sarah felt like she had to choose between her job and her family, and she didn't know what to do. Sheryl even told Sarah to hire a Filipina nanny because they were service-oriented. Sarah was shocked that Sheryl would say something like that. Sarah's experience with pumping breast milk while traveling internationally was very difficult. She was expected to pump anywhere, anytime. During one of her travels, a hotel staff had misunderstood her. The entire travel was an awful experience, and she felt very uncomfortable. Sarah's experiences showed her that Silicon Valley could be a greedy and immoral place. People cared more about money and power than about doing what was right. Sarah felt like she was losing herself and that she needed to make a change. Section 4. This section covers chapters 12 to 15 in the book. Sarah Wynn-Williams saw how people in Silicon Valley sometimes only cared about themselves and getting more money, even if it meant doing things that weren't fair or kind. For example, when she was trying to teach Mark Zuckerberg how to bow respectfully to the leader of South Korea, he didn't take it seriously. He acted like it was a joke, even though she knew that showing respect to other leaders was really important. She remembered how Bill Gates once made a mistake when greeting the South Korean president, and it caused a lot of problems. But Mark just didn't seem to care about these things. She noticed that Mark wasn't really interested in what was happening in other countries, unless it affected Facebook's money. It was like he only cared about the United States. Sarah thought this was a problem because Facebook was a global company, and it needed to understand and respect different cultures and rules. She found that Mark only cared about foreign policy meetings if he had to be there. He was usually nervous and sweaty at these meetings. Sarah realized that some of the leaders at Facebook were okay with putting their employees in tough situations just to get what they wanted. She remembered when the company was in trouble in Korea because they didn't follow the rules about rating games. Instead of fixing the problem, the leaders talked about sending someone to jail to test how serious the Korean police were. It was like they saw their employees as objects to be used, not as real people with families and feelings. Sarah was shocked that they were willing to sacrifice someone's freedom just to protect the company. Sarah also noticed how people at Facebook were obsessed with status and competition. When she found out she was going on a private jet with Mark and the other leaders, she was excited about getting frequent flyer miles. But her coworker told her that it was a big deal just to be on the jet, and that people would do anything to be in her place. It was like everyone was fighting to get closer to Mark and the people in power. When they got to the fancy resort, Sarah felt like an outsider because she wasn't used to that kind of luxury. During the trip, Sarah saw how some of Mark's employees would let him win when they played board games. They would make it easier for him to get resources and avoid being blocked. Sarah called them out on it, saying that they were enabling him. But Mark didn't even realize what was happening. It was like he was surrounded by people who were afraid to tell him the truth or challenge him. Sarah also saw how Mark wanted to be seen as a regular guy, but he didn't always know how to connect with people. One time, he tried to take a photo for some tourists, but they didn't know who he was and pushed him away. He was really upset because he wasn't used to being rejected. Sarah realized that he lived in a bubble where people always treated him like a celebrity. Later on, Mark asked Sarah to organize a riot or a peace rally for him. She was shocked because it was such a strange and dangerous request. She thought he wanted to see how much power Facebook had to mobilize people in the real world. It made her think that he was more interested in using Facebook to control people than to help them. When they arrived in Indonesia, there was even more chaos. Mark didn't want to wear the traditional batik shirt that he was supposed to wear for his meeting with the president-elect. He was being stubborn and difficult. When they finally got to the meeting, there was a huge crowd of people pushing and shoving. Sarah was separated from her team and almost got hurt. She realized that the situation could have been really dangerous. After all of that, they find out a pop star was in the room because he was a big fan of Facebook. During the meeting, Sarah realized that the president-elect believed he won the election because of Facebook. He saw Facebook as a tool for connecting with people and making positive change. But Sarah started to wonder if Facebook could also be used for bad things, like helping the wrong people get into power. Sarah saw how Facebook's leaders sometimes made decisions that were selfish, unfair, and even dangerous. She began to question whether she really wanted to work for a company that didn't seem to care about its employees or the world around it. Section 5. This section covers chapters 16 to 19 in the book. Sarah Wynn-Williams saw how much Silicon Valley wanted to make money and how little they cared who got hurt. It seemed like their only goal was to get richer, even if it meant doing bad things. They didn't care about right or wrong, just about making more money than everyone else. It was like they were playing a game where the only rule was to win, no matter what. Sarah watched as Mark Zuckerberg tried to get Facebook into China. China is a huge country, and Mark thought Facebook could make a lot of money there. But China's government is very strict. They watch everything people do online and don't let them say anything bad about the government. Sarah knew that to get into China, Facebook would have to help the government spy on its own people. Mark didn't seem to care. He just wanted the money. He acted like getting into China was just something he had to check off his list, like a chore. Sheryl Sandberg once told Sarah that rich people go through a cycle. First, they travel the world. Then, they get bored and try to get super fit. After that, they buy expensive toys like boats. Finally, they get divorced or have some other big problem. Only then do they start to think about helping others. Sarah thought this was a sad way to live. It was like rich people didn't know what was really important. Sarah saw how Mark only seemed to care about food. He told her that the richest man in Japan ate the most expensive tuna every day. Sarah knew that this tuna was almost extinct because people were catching too many of them. It was like Mark didn't care that these fish were disappearing. He just wanted to eat the best food, no matter the cost. Mark also collected old bottles of wine because they were from the time of Andrew Jackson. He said Jackson was the best president ever because he was tough and got things done. But Sarah knew that Jackson had been cruel to Native Americans, forcing them off their land. Mark didn't mention that. It was like he only cared about the good things Jackson did and ignored the bad. After a trip to Indonesia, Mark seemed to change. He saw how much people loved the president-elect. It was like a light bulb went on in his head. He started asking questions about how politics worked in other countries. Sarah thought maybe he was finally starting to see that there was more to life than just making money. When Joel Kaplan became Sarah's boss, things got worse. Joel only cared about American politics and didn't seem to know much about the rest of the world. He wanted to make politicians use Facebook to win elections. That way, they would be less likely to do anything that would hurt Facebook. It was like he was trying to bribe them. Joel also wanted Sarah to start political groups in other countries that would give money to politicians. Sarah told him that was illegal. She thought it was wrong to try to buy politicians' support. She knew it was a bad idea to let foreigners control elections. Sarah saw how Silicon Valley was changing. It used to be about creating cool things and helping people. Now, it was just about making as much money as possible, no matter what. She thought it was sad that these smart, talented people were wasting their time on something so selfish. Section 6. This section covers chapters 20 to 23 in the book. Sarah Wynn-Williams saw a pattern of behavior at Facebook that made her think about the company's greed and lack of moral compass. It seemed like the company often put its own interests above what was right, and this was especially clear when dealing with governments. One example of this was when Facebook blocked a page in Russia that supported a political leader who was against the government. The Russian government asked them to do this, and Facebook quickly agreed. Sarah felt like this showed that Facebook cared more about staying in business in Russia than about letting people speak freely. Mark Zuckerberg, the boss of Facebook, even got involved in these decisions. He started to overrule the rules that Sarah and her team had worked hard to create. It was like he was making up the rules as he went along, and his decisions often helped Facebook make more money. Sarah noticed that Mark would block content that governments didn't like, even if it didn't break Facebook's rules. For example, he blocked a video in Mexico because the president of Mexico asked him to. He also blocked political speech in Indonesia and South Korea because those governments wanted him to. It seemed like Mark was more interested in keeping governments happy than in following the rules that Facebook had set for itself. This made Sarah feel like all the hard work she and her team had put into creating those rules was pointless. The company's rules had been made to maintain the integrity and trustworthiness of the platform, but now it was obvious that the rules were not meant to be followed. Sarah felt that Facebook was sending a bad message to governments around the world. By giving in to the demands of powerful governments, Facebook was basically inviting them to bully the company into doing what they wanted. It made Sarah question the integrity of the company and wonder whether Facebook cared about anything other than making money. Sarah noticed this pattern during a conference in Davos, Switzerland. She went to Davos with her baby, and she managed Facebook's presence there. She noticed that the conference was all about status and power. People at Davos were constantly trying to impress each other and climb the social ladder. During the conference, Sarah saw how Facebook was trying to avoid paying taxes in Europe. The company was using complicated tricks to move its money to countries where taxes were low. The Prime Minister of Ireland was even helping Facebook get away with this. She thought this was not right, and that Facebook should be paying its fair share. It seemed like Facebook was willing to do whatever it took to make money, even if it meant bending the rules or helping powerful people stay in power. She felt that this was a sign of greed and a lack of moral compass. Facebook's only priority appeared to be making money, no matter how that goal was accomplished. Sarah remembered the meeting with the president of Colombia to promote Internet.org. Mark Zuckerberg, the head of Facebook, made the president wait because he didn't want to meet early in the morning. She knew that Colombia was trying to make peace with a rebel group, and it seemed wrong that Mark cared more about his sleep schedule than about helping with such an important process. After a series of miscommunications and late arrivals, the meeting was short and uncomfortable. Sarah felt that Mark hadn't taken it seriously. She saw it as another example of how someone cared more about his own needs than about what was happening in the world. She had hoped that Facebook could help bring the world together, but she was starting to worry about Silicon Valley's selfishness and lack of ethics. Another example of Facebook putting its own interests first was its decision to invest in helping politicians win elections. Sheryl Sandberg, another top executive at Facebook, thought that this would help the company get what it wanted from governments. She said that politicians who had a positive experience using Facebook would be more likely to partner with us to address policy issues. Sarah thought this was a dangerous idea. She worried that Facebook would end up getting too close to powerful people who were not good. She thought that the company should stay neutral and not try to influence elections. But her voice was drowned out. She thought that this approach would only end badly. She thought they would get too close to people who lose, which could make whoever wins not like them. And in other places, she thought they would get too close to people who did bad things and won office with the help of Facebook. That would not be good for Facebook in a different way. Either way, they would be helping bad leaders win elections. She thought it was best to stay as neutral as possible. Sarah realized that Facebook was changing. It was becoming more focused on making money and more willing to do whatever it took to get its way. She began to wonder if she should still be working there. She couldn't stop questioning herself about what Facebook had become. She found herself at a crossroads about her future. Section 7. This section covers chapters 24 to 27 in the book. Sarah Wynn-Williams saw how Silicon Valley, especially Facebook, could be driven by a need to win at all costs, sometimes forgetting what's right and wrong. It was like they were so focused on getting ahead that they didn't always think about who they might be hurting along the way. This was clear in how they chased after growth and power. One big example was Internet.org, which was supposed to give people in poor countries free internet. But Sarah noticed it wasn't really the whole internet, just a few apps and websites that Facebook picked. This made some people angry because they thought everyone should have equal access to all information online, not just what Facebook allowed. It felt like Facebook was trying to control what people could see and do online, just to get more users. Even worse, Sarah found out that these free apps didn't have the same safety rules as the regular internet. This meant things like hate speech and scams could spread easily, hurting the people who needed protection the most. It was like Facebook was giving people a broken version of the internet and not caring about the consequences. Sarah tried to tell Mark Zuckerberg, the boss of Facebook, that they should change the name of Internet.org because it was misleading. She felt like they were pretending to be saving the world when they were really just trying to get more users. But Mark didn't want to listen. He was so focused on winning that he didn't want to admit they were doing anything wrong. Things got even crazier when Facebook started fighting with the government of India over internet.org. Mark wanted to use street fighter tactics like Uber, which meant causing trouble and chaos to get what they wanted. He even talked about making a list of enemies who were against Facebook and finding ways to pressure them. Sarah was shocked. It felt like Mark was turning into a bully who would do anything to win, even if it meant hurting people. Sarah decided she couldn't support Facebook's actions anymore. She stopped trying so hard to convince people that internet.org was a good thing. Instead, she tried to speak up inside Facebook and hoped that someone would listen. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she felt like she had to do something to stop Facebook from becoming a force for evil. In the end, Facebook's plans for internet.org in India failed. The government banned it, and the company's efforts to launch a Wi-Fi drone and satellite also ended in disaster. It was like the universe was telling them they were on the wrong path. Sarah hoped that Mark and the other leaders of Facebook would learn from these failures and start to think more about the impact of their actions on the world. But she wasn't sure if they would ever change. Section 8. This section covers chapters 28 to 31 in the book. Sarah felt that Cheryl, her boss, was often missing in action, leaving a young, inexperienced staff to make big decisions. These young employees, hungry for power, sometimes made decisions that felt more like favors for Cheryl than good business. For example, Sadie, a bright and ambitious young woman, quickly gained influence, making important choices that even surprised Sarah. Sarah noticed that even Mark Zuckerberg, the big boss, seemed to live in a different world, even though they lived near each other. He was so rich and powerful that he couldn't even find a place to park his helicopter. One day, Sarah found out that Mark and Cheryl might be cheating to get more likes and followers on social media. Someone was using secret Facebook tools to make them look super popular. Sarah knew this wasn't fair. As Sarah got closer to having her baby, she felt pressure to travel for work, even though it was risky. When she tried to say no to a work trip to Davos, Cheryl's office didn't seem to care about Sarah's health. They just wanted her to get a doctor's note. At Davos, everyone was worried about terrorism. Cheryl even said that terrorism was good for Facebook because it made people care less about privacy. This meant Facebook could collect more data, which was good for business. Sarah thought it was wrong to take advantage of a tragedy. Sarah saw that politicians were starting to ask Facebook for favors, like helping them win elections. They wanted Facebook to use its power to help them, and they threatened to make new rules if Facebook didn't agree. Sarah felt like Facebook was becoming too powerful and that they were abusing that power. On the flight back from Davos, Cheryl asked Sarah to get into bed with her. Sarah felt really uncomfortable because she was pregnant, and it felt wrong for a boss to ask that. When Sarah said no, Cheryl got angry, and Sarah knew things would change for her at Facebook. Sarah realized that Cheryl rewarded people who were close to her, giving them gifts, jobs, and special treatment. Sadie, for example, got lots of nice things from Cheryl and was always trying to please her. Cheryl even asked Sadie to buy expensive underwear for both of them. Sarah thought this was weird and inappropriate. Sarah started to see how much Cheryl expected from her employees and how hard it was to say no. She realized that she needed to find a new job where she could have a healthier relationship with her boss. When the plane landed, Cheryl told Sarah that she should have gotten into bed with her. Sarah was shocked and upset. She knew she had to leave Facebook, but she was pregnant and didn't know how she would find a new job. After the trip, Sarah tried to tell her bosses about what happened on the plane, but they didn't want to hear it. They told her to keep quiet. Sarah felt alone and realized that no one at Facebook cared about her well-being. Sarah realized that her life was going well in some ways. She was rich and successful, but she felt empty inside. She realized that the American dream wasn't what she thought it would be. Sarah also had to take a test to become an American citizen. She was really nervous and worried about failing. While she was waiting to take the test, her boss, Joel, sent her a gross and inappropriate email. Sarah was disgusted. Sarah failed the first question on the test because she couldn't remember her wedding date. She managed to answer all the other questions correctly, but then she found out that she hadn't lived in California long enough to become a citizen. She was so stressed because her husband's visa was about to expire and they might have to leave the country. Sarah realized that she couldn't quit her job because she needed Facebook's help to stay in America. She felt trapped and hopeless. In early 2016, Sarah, Joel, and Cheryl knew that Facebook was in trouble with governments all over the world. They were worried about getting new rules that could hurt the company. Sarah wanted Facebook to work with governments to make things better, but she knew that Joel and Cheryl had other ideas. They wanted to use money and power to get their way. Sarah was asked to give a presentation to Facebook's board of directors about the problems they were facing. She wanted to scare them into taking action, but they didn't seem very worried. They just wanted to know what they could offer politicians and regulators to make them happy. One of the board members even suggested that Facebook should be like the tobacco industry, which is known for being dishonest and harmful. Sarah was shocked. A few days later, Sarah had her performance review. Joel told her that she was confusing because sometimes she was helpful and smart, but other times she didn't hide her feelings. He said that she had rolled her eyes at the board of directors. Sarah explained that she had rolled her eyes because one of the board members had suggested that Facebook should work with far-right political parties in Europe. Sarah thought this was a terrible idea. In March 2016, a Facebook executive in Brazil was arrested because WhatsApp wouldn't give the government access to people's messages. Sarah knew this executive and liked him. She thought it was wrong for him to be in jail. Mark Zuckerberg wanted to write a Facebook post about the arrest, but everyone told him it was a bad idea. They said it would make the situation worse and could even put other employees at risk. Sarah was disgusted with Mark because he seemed more worried about writing a good Facebook post than about helping the executive who was in jail. She realized that Mark didn't care about the people who worked for him. Sarah finally realized that she had to leave Facebook. She couldn't work for a company that was so greedy and uncaring. She started looking for a new job, even though she was pregnant and knew it would be hard. Sarah had hoped that Mark would become a better person as he gained more power, but she was wrong. He just became more selfish and out of touch. The arrest of the Facebook executive in Brazil made Sarah see that she had to leave Facebook. She couldn't stay at a company that didn't care about its employees or the world around it. She felt trapped, but she knew she had to find a way out. Section 9. This section covers chapters 32 to 35 in the book. Sarah Wynn-Williams, a smart lady who used to work for Facebook, saw firsthand how some people in Silicon Valley seemed to care more about money and power than doing what was right. It was like they were so focused on getting ahead that they forgot about how their actions affected others. This wasn't everyone, of course, but it was a troubling trend she noticed. One example of this was how Facebook dealt with the 2016 election. Even though there were signs that fake news and misinformation on the platform were influencing voters, some leaders at Facebook didn't seem too worried. They were making lots of money from political ads, and they didn't want to do anything that might hurt their profits. Sarah even had to tell one of her bosses that I was in a coma because she wasn't replying to emails fast enough during her maternity leave. That was how much they wanted her to work. Sarah noticed that some of the people in charge seemed to be living in their own little world, where they didn't have to worry about the same things as everyone else. One time, the big boss of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, forgot his passport when they were supposed to fly to Peru for a meeting with world leaders. Instead of taking responsibility, he blamed his staff. That showed Sarah how disconnected he was from normal life. It was also shocking to see how some leaders at Facebook reacted to Donald Trump's election victory. Instead of being concerned about the impact of Trump's policies, they were excited about the tax cuts and other things that would benefit their business. They didn't seem to care about the potential harm to people who were Black, Hispanic, or immigrants. They were just worried about their own bottom line. Even when Sarah tried to raise concerns about how politicians were using Facebook to spread misinformation and manipulate voters, she was often dismissed. Her bosses didn't seem to think it was a big deal, especially if it meant making more money. They acted like it was just business, even if that business hurt others. She said one of the bosses once said, "Trump's got the Senate. He's got the House. It's a decisive victory. He can do things. Great things. Not only that, it's going to be great for tech and for business." All of this made Sarah realize that something was seriously wrong with the values of some people in Silicon Valley. They were so focused on their own success that they had lost sight of what was truly important, doing what was right and helping others. It also made her feel like she was working for a company that didn't care about her health. It felt to her like they were sending the message, "Get back to work." Section 10. This section covers chapters 36 to 39 in the book. Sarah Wynn-Williams watched Mark brood on the flight, a clear sign of the inflated ego that was so common in Silicon Valley. He wanted to play board games, but only if he could win. When Sarah beat him at Ticket to Ride, he got mad and said she cheated. This showed how Mark, like many powerful people in Silicon Valley, was used to getting his way. He couldn't believe that someone could beat him fairly because he thought he was always right. The game of Settlers of Catan didn't go any better. Sarah won again, and Mark loudly accused her of cheating. Other people on the plane started paying attention. Sarah knew Mark was upset about the election and being blamed for it, but she couldn't stand being called a cheater. She told him that he almost won and that he was too focused on winning every little thing instead of thinking about the big picture. This kind of thinking, where you have to win at everything, was a big problem in Silicon Valley. Sarah gave an example of Facebook's Internet org. She said that Mark refused to change the name, even though people told him it was a bad idea. Because Mark wanted to win this small battle, Facebook lost trust with the people who make the rules, and the whole project almost didn't happen. This showed how Mark's stubbornness and need to win at everything hurt the company. Mark thought about what Sarah said and admitted she was right. But then he started talking about his legacy, what he would be remembered for. He was obsessed with his Harvard speech and his personal challenges, like making an AI assistant. Someone suggested that the AI only listened to Mark's voice, ignoring his wife, Priscilla. Mark thought this was funny, showing a lack of respect for women, which was also a problem in Silicon Valley. Mark then announced his challenge for the next year, visiting every state to meet people. Sarah knew Mark didn't like traveling or meeting people, so this seemed strange. He wanted to visit states where people vote early in elections. It seemed like he was planning to run for president. When Sarah asked about it, Elliot, another person on the plane, didn't want to talk about it. Sarah realized that no one around Mark would tell him no. Mark started talking about how the news media had failed and that Facebook should fix it. He even suggested buying Twitter or the New York Times to control the news. This showed how power could make people want to control everything around them, even the news. Elliot tried to warn him, but Mark wanted to dominate the media, not work with it. Mark said that he had thought that the way to fix the news would be to create a fifth estate, which would be centered around Facebook. Sarah realized that Mark had changed. He used to be about building things, but now he was about power and control. He had seen how Facebook helped Trump win the election and thought he could do the same. He had the tools, the money, and the ability to control what people saw on Facebook. It was a scary thought. As the plane landed, Mark asked Sarah what she thought. She wanted to tell him that this was a bad idea and that he had lost touch with his decency. But instead, she panicked and said, "Rosebud," from the movie Citizen Kane. Mark didn't understand the reference, but Sarah was trying to say that Mark was becoming like William Randolph Hearst, a powerful man who controlled the news and ran for office. Mark didn't seem to care if that was a bad thing. In the months that followed, Mark traveled around the country, visiting farms, factories, and churches. He hired photographers to document his trips and posted them on Facebook. He also started working out and eating healthier. It was clear to everyone that he was running for president. He even hired consultants who had worked for Obama and Bush. Then, some bad news came out about Mark suing people in Hawaii to take their land. This was the kind of thing he would have ignored before, but now he was worried about how it looked to the public. He tried to fix the problem, but it didn't work completely. It showed that he cared more about his image than doing the right thing. Finally, Facebook's board approved a plan that would allow Mark to leave the company for 2 years to work in government. It was clear that he was serious about running for president. One of the board members even joked that the cat's in the bag, meaning that Mark was going to do it no matter what. Sarah also started looking for a new job because she knew she couldn't stay at Facebook. She needed health insurance because she was having health problems. It was a difficult situation because she would lose a lot of money if she left Facebook. On the day Trump was inaugurated, Sarah was flying home from Davos with Cheryl, Elliot, and other Facebook people. She knew that Trump's inauguration would be a dangerous thing for both herself and everyone around her. She had to figure out how to get out of Facebook as soon as possible. Davos had become normal. The most difficult part of the trip was ensuring that Cheryl got everything that she needed. The team at Facebook always tried to craft the best comments about Cheryl and make sure that she was as happy as possible. During the 2017 Davos convention, a few of Cheryl's most trusted advisors made a WhatsApp group that complained about everything that Cheryl did. They would make sure to make her feel as if she was doing a good job, but complain about her right after. She realized how two-faced people can be. Sarah had watched people who disagreed with Cheryl and Mark lose their place at Facebook. They always reward those who always listen to them with a lot of money. Openly going against their thinking was not an option. On Cheryl's private jet, Sarah and a couple of women were invited to the bedroom at the back of the jet. Elliot wanted to take a nap as well. Cheryl called Sadie over, and then Sadie said that Cheryl found Elliot creepy, and Cheryl had asked the girls to her bedroom. While they were working, hundreds of thousands of women were protesting in the streets in Washington, D.C. Cheryl then went on a panel where Elliot called her the unofficial self-appointed world dean of women. Cheryl then picks at her food and asks what Melania wore at Trump's inauguration. Sadie used to work at the Lean-In organization and tried to get Cheryl to talk about the Women's March. Sadie gives Sarah a look that shows Cheryl does not care about the Women's March and that they should drop the topic. Sarah found out that there was a secret Facebook group where 200 female employees that worked under Cheryl were talking about issues that Cheryl was not resolving. It was called the Feminist Fight Club. A bot had been announced to help reward and encourage men to support women in the workplace. The bot was for men to thank each other when one saw one man supporting women. One of the girls in the FFC stated, "Doesn't it seem like this is an undue amount of credit for men who are hitting the bare minimum of decency?" Women had started to talk more openly about the harassment that they were facing at Facebook. One coworker closed the door and told her, "Don't be alone with him. Stick to the open plan office and don't let him talk to you about sex stuff." She found out that the leaders in charge would protect the abuser. She decides to talk to Elliot. Sarah tells Elliot about Joel's behavior. He wasn't surprised or concerned. When she was done, he stated that everything was solvable and that it would work itself out. She then said, "And if it doesn't work itself out?" Elliot then states that he'd be happy to write her a reference. A few days later, one of Joel's team invites her out to a drink. They asked about the investigation that she had started and if she had told people about Joel. They stated that Joel looks out for his loyal people. The people on Joel's team are told to keep quiet. The person running the investigation asks her what she wants them to do about Joel. Before replying to the investigator, she goes back to Elliot to ask him if stopping this investigation will stop Joel's creepy behavior. He nods yes. Joel had halved her job. She could either take Asia or Latin America. He was trying to make her do what he wanted, so that he could get rid of her and ensure that she did not do anything that went against him. She chose to take Latin America and Canada. Joel and Elliot were shocked. They counter that they'll only give her the smaller job if she leads the search to find someone to run Asia. She agrees to search for someone to run Asia. Section 11. This section covers chapters 40 to 43 in the book. Sarah Wynn-Williams found herself in a tough spot running Facebook's China policy even though she really didn't want to. It felt like a loyalty test to a government she didn't admire. She knew Facebook cared a lot about China, since it was their second biggest market for ads, making them billions of dollars, even though Facebook was actually blocked in China. Diving into the documents, Sarah discovered how badly Facebook wanted to get into China. Mark Zuckerberg, the big boss, had even hired important people, like former government officials, to help him. He got advice from famous people like Henry Kissinger. Sarah wondered why China would even want Facebook. She found documents saying Facebook promised to help China's economy and global image. But the real key was that Facebook would help China keep things safe and secure, which really meant spying on people. Facebook basically offered China a way to watch its own citizens. Since Facebook users used their real names, the Chinese government could easily track what people were doing and saying. Sarah felt this was wrong, like Facebook was helping China control its people. She couldn't imagine Mark Zuckerberg making those kinds of promises to Americans. Sarah worried about who would do all the spying. Would it be Facebook employees or a Chinese company? The documents showed Facebook leaders knew their employees might be responsible for things like people getting arrested, tortured, or even killed because of what they posted on Facebook. But they still wanted to be in charge of the spying themselves, so they could control the information and work directly with the Chinese government. The project to get into China was called Aldrin, like the astronaut. Facebook even partnered with a Chinese company called Honey Capital, which was nicknamed Jupiter. Honey would keep all the Chinese user data in China and decide what content to censor, following the Chinese government's orders. Facebook would create tools to help Honey censor content, even private messages between people in China and people outside China. This seemed incredibly unfair to Sarah. Facebook built special censorship tools, including a kill switch, to block entire regions of China from talking to the outside world during times of trouble. They even had a letter ready for Mark to send to the head of China's internet police, promising to help fight terrorism, which in China could mean anything the government didn't like human rights activists. Sarah was horrified that Facebook would become allies with China in this way. She even found an email where a Facebook employee admitted that a lot of the censorship might be about silly things, like making fun of government officials. Sarah also learned that Facebook was willing to store Chinese user data in China, something they had refused to do for other countries. She had personally told other government officials that Facebook would never put its servers in countries where the government might try to steal data. But now, Facebook was offering China a much better deal. Facebook even worked with Google to build an undersea cable that would connect China and the US, making it easier for China to intercept internet traffic. They knew the risks but didn't care, because getting into China was Mark's top priority. One of Facebook's supposed rules was that China wouldn't get access to the data of users outside China. But the documents showed that Facebook planned to use servers in China that could store data from people outside China who were in contact with people inside China. This meant the Chinese government could potentially access that data. There were also concerns that the Chinese people doing the content moderation could steal data on non-Chinese users and give it to the government. Facebook knew that Chinese spies might try to break into Facebook systems. The Facebook's own experts thought this was likely to happen. The documents even said that the US government might try to break into Facebook systems in China to collect intelligence. Sarah was shocked that Facebook was working so closely with China that its own government would treat it like an enemy. As Sarah read on, she found detailed information about Facebook's technology, algorithms, and facial recognition, things she thought would never be shared with anyone outside Facebook. Facebook was giving China special treatment. Sarah realized that Facebook's leadership knew all of this was wrong. They were worried about leaks and had a plan to deal with the problems they would face if the world found out what they were doing in China. The problem was, they knew they couldn't tell the full truth. The team even came up with fake headlines about what the news coverage might be, like Chinese government uses Facebook to spy on its citizens, And Facebook hands over data on Chinese citizens to the Chinese government. They knew this would hurt Facebook's image, so they ran focus groups to see how people would react. One of the findings was that the idea that Facebook cares about people's privacy is not believable anywhere. Facebook spent millions of dollars on the China project, even planning to give money to groups who would support them and neutralize groups that might criticize them. When the team asked Mark what he'd consider a successful launch in China, he said that even getting 20% of the internet population in China would be a win. The team knew that Congress would want to know what technological advances Facebook was sharing with the Chinese government. They warned that it's good politics for members of Congress to be tough on China and to look like they're protecting the people who use Facebook. They even prepared Mark for tough questions in Congress, coaching him to avoid answering them directly. The team knew they were misleading Congress, but they assumed they wouldn't get caught. They even considered the possibility that Congress would compare Facebook's actions in China to being complicit with the Nazis. If Mark was asked if he was abetting crimes against humanity, he was supposed to say that it hurt his feelings. In a Senate hearing, Mark lied about Facebook's relationship with the Chinese government, saying that no decisions had been made about the conditions under which Facebook might operate in China. After the hearing, Facebook's stock price went up. Mark said that getting into China would become an even bigger priority for Facebook as they solved other problems. Sarah knew she had to hire someone to take over her role as soon as possible and then get out. She worried about the person she would hire, knowing that they would be working closely with the Chinese government and would be at risk. She thought even Vaughn understood her concerns. She found notes from meetings between Facebook and Chinese officials, where the officials were asking Facebook to censor content and help them arrest bad people, which really meant anyone who criticized the government. Facebook even blocked the Facebook page of Guo Wengui, a Chinese billionaire who was critical of the Chinese government. The head of China's internet police had made it clear that Facebook's actions regarding Guo would affect whether Facebook would be allowed into China. Facebook claimed that the shutdown of Guo's account was an accident, but the New York Times reported that it was likely due to pressure from the Chinese government. Later, Facebook's general counsel told the Senate Intelligence Committee that Facebook had not come under pressure from the Chinese government to block Guo's account, but that was not true. Facebook also secretly launched 2 apps in China without getting the proper licenses or telling investors, employees, or Congress. They created a shell company and launched the apps under different names, removing all references to Facebook. When the New York Times found out about it, Facebook panicked. The secret launch of one of the apps became a top priority for Mark, who wanted to get into China no matter how dishonest it seemed. The team was more concerned about media attention than the Chinese government. The lawyers thought the shell company might have been faked, and the whole situation turned into a shit show. One of the team members joked about it. Facebook even considered registering the company as a couple. After the New York Times published the story, Chinese officials were upset, and the apps were shut down. Despite all this, Facebook continued to use the same approach for other projects in China. Facebook's chief financial officer raised concerns about Facebook's accounting practices and hiring in China. Sarah discovered that Facebook's chief representative in China was working there illegally, without the proper work permit. She worried that they could cause significant harm to Facebook by reporting these violations to the Chinese authorities. Facebook was operating illegally in China, and it didn't seem to care about the rules. Section 12. This section covers chapters 44 to 48 in the book. Sarah Wynn-Williams saw how greed and a lack of morals were everywhere in Silicon Valley. It felt like Facebook only cared about making money and getting more powerful. They didn't seem to think about how their choices hurt people. The leaders at Facebook acted like they were better than everyone else. They thought they knew what was best for the world, but they were really just making things worse for a lot of people and better for themselves. Facebook knew that people would buy more stuff if they felt bad about themselves. So they let companies target teens when they felt worthless or insecure. Sarah Wynn-Williams was shocked. She thought it was wrong to use kids' feelings to sell them things. But most people at Facebook didn't seem to care. They thought it was just a good way to make money. The company even tracked when young girls deleted selfies so it could show them ads for beauty products at that exact moment. It felt like Facebook was going too far. When bad things happened because of Facebook, the leaders didn't want to take responsibility. When there was violence in Myanmar because of hate speech on Facebook, they didn't do much to stop it. They only had a few people working on the problem, even though they knew it was serious. Sarah Wynn-Williams wanted to hire someone to help, but her boss said no. It felt like Facebook didn't care about the people of Myanmar. They only cared about making money, instead of helping the people who needed it the most. Sarah Wynn-Williams' boss, Joel, was creepy to her at work. He made rude comments and touched her without her permission. She reported him to the company, but they didn't do anything about it. Instead, they started investigating her. They said she wasn't doing her job well, even though her boss was making it hard for her to do her job. In the end, they fired her. It felt like Facebook cared more about protecting powerful men than about protecting women from being harassed. Sarah Wynn-Williams tried to make things better at Facebook, but she couldn't. The people in charge only cared about making money and getting more powerful. They didn't care about the harm they were causing and didn't seem to care about being responsible. She eventually realized that Facebook was doing more harm than good, so she left. She felt sad that the company she once believed in had become so corrupt and careless with the power it held. The greed for money and power had taken over. And that brings us to the end of our summary of this book. I hope you found it insightful and valuable. If you enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe for more. Your support helps us bring you more great content. Thanks for watching.